Hey, what's going on, everybody? My name is Matt Jarbo, and this is $3 Theater, hopefully one of your good sources for movie news and commentary here on YouTube. But, I like to talk about the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the DCEU quite a bit. Yesterday, I talked about DC basically talking about wanting to finally start producing R-rated films after the success of Logan and Deadpool. And, there are some good suggestions in the comments on that one. Someone said an R-rated Lobo film, which sounds pretty badass. So I would totally be on board with that. But now we're getting this new thing where the producer is saying that future solo films may have flashbacks and flash forwards. Now, this is where the DCEU can kind of really start to screw up. And Marvel is dealing with that right now, which I will be touching on a little bit later in my Thor video about Ragnarok, about the timeline of events going on with that. But to kind of quickly summarize that point, Marvel, outside of Captain America First Avenger, has pretty much followed a specific timeline, and even the end of Captain America followed a timeline. And now we're kind of getting to the point where that timeline is becoming fractured. And that is where, if DC doesn't do it the right way, they're going to kind of screw things up, because we know that Wonder Woman and Justice League come out this year. We know that Aquaman and supposedly the Batman come out next year. Who knows? Gotham City Sirens, Suicide Squad 2. I mean, Green Lantern Corps, who knows? Flash is supposed to come out next year too, but they still don't have a damn director. I mean, that could still happen, but they don't even have a director. Right. So there are issues with what's going on with the DCEU right now. So the producer saying that future solo films may have flashbacks and flash forwards makes me really question if they're going to do away with origin films entirely. And if this is like a setup for the Aquaman movie filming right now, and maybe the Flash film. It says here, the world DC Films is creating as the DC Expanded Universe, or the DCEU, has been generally linear. Obviously, Wonder Woman's taking a bit of departure from that, with a framing sequence set after Batman v Superman that starts Diana on her trip down memory lane and then sets up her Justice League adventure, holding it in place. Most of the movie will technically be a flashback, as she remembers her first entry into man's world during World War I. And, it's kind of a reverse Captain America in that regard, right? Because in Captain America, it was him starting off World War II, then him, becoming Captain America, getting frozen in ice, and then being woken up by S.H.I.E.L.D. in 2011, right? So, we know, they kind of set the world and then brought him in. This is something a character we've already had kind of established with Batman v Superman. And then, now she's getting this origin story, which makes sense because they want to give Wonder Woman her own solo movie, and you always have to have an origin story with these kind of characters because people want to know. As much as we bitch about origin stories, they are useful. They are extremely fucking useful. We wanted Captain America to have an origin story. We wanted Thor to have an origin story. We wanted Hulk to have an origin story, even though the Hulk origin story was kind of more based on the TV show than the movie or the comic book or whatever. And that was kind of him already out there doing things. But we still want to have these stories to get used to the actors playing in those roles, right? This is kind of necessary. It is. It's necessary. Unless you have a large slate lined up for these films or for these characters, and you give them each very specific iconic parts in those films to flesh out who they are. One of the reasons why Age of Ultron, I think, worked as well as it did story-wise was that it gave us more about Hawkeye. Because in the first movie, he spent half of it being a bad guy. And then this one gave us more about who he is as a person. While it wasn't a standalone solo film, because I don't know if Clint Barton could actually do it, it definitely worked well for what they were trying to establish and gave us more of him to enjoy, which I think will then work well in the future films and stuff. But it does go on to say, it turns out that the fluid timeline approach is how DC Films plans to go forward from this point on. Just as Batman v Superman has some flashbacks to the recent past and even some flash forwards to a possible dreamlike future, other movies in the universe will explore origin stories while also teasing what's to come. That's okay. That's a little interesting. All right. Yeah. The dark side, situation, that the nightmare sequence in Batman v Superman was definitely a setup for the future. It was definitely a Justice League setup. Was it a little bit kind of premature in my opinion? Yes, it was. Did it need to be in Batman v Superman? No, it didn't. Could it have been in Justice League and still worked as well? Absolutely. But it did kind of set up the whole, Batman working with Superman and everything else, even though technically in that scene, it never really deterred him from his path of wanting to kill Superman. So it was just one of those things that maybe kind of worked into it. I got no idea. Even though Batman v Superman, the extended cut is one of my top 5 from 2016, that is still a scene that doesn't make sense story-wise. But having a fluid timeline approach may not work as well. Like I said, Marvel has always kind of held a certain pathway until recently. And if they start going fluid, it's gonna start confusing people, and I will be talking about that in another video. But here's where it goes on to say. For example, the Justice League movie will take place in a universe that's post Batman v Superman, just like Batman v Superman takes place in a universe that's post Man of Steel. This is coming from Charles Roven, who told comicbook.com in an interview supporting Wonder Woman's release. When we're dealing with either The Flash or Aquaman, since they take place in a universe that has happened after Justice League, the characters in the world will be informed by the movies that preceded them, except that there's flashbacks or whatever within those particular movies, and flash forwards within those particular movies. Okay, look, flashbacks, I can understand. I can understand the flashbacks from that perspective. Okay, like you cannot sit there and give The Flash an origin movie after Justice League. It's just going to feel odd. It'd be like if Doctor Strange showed up in Civil War and then got an origin story. Or, like Ant-Man. Ant-Man got an origin movie and then the next summer had an awesome cameo in Civil War. But to reverse that would feel very odd. DC, I mean, I get it. Like if they're talking about the origin of Aquaman or the origin of the Flash, then that kind of makes sense. And that could also be told very similarly to maybe the opening credit sequence of Ang Lee's The Hulk, which essentially, if I recall correctly, kind of walked us through the process of how Bruce Banner became the Hulk, right? It was like through the flashbacks in the very beginning, set the stage for him getting the gamma radiation and becoming the Hulk. So I could understand it from that perspective, but the flash forwards, again, that was a very, excellent scene, was a very weak addition to the overall Batman v Superman movie. But Charles goes on to say, when we talk about who Arthur Curry is, and we talk about the universe when that movie starts in terms of him and where he is, obviously Atlantis exists and has existed before the timeline of his movie, but both Justice League director Zack Snyder and Aquaman director James Wan collaborate on what the look of both movies will be. Okay, so we did see the other day that Zack Snyder posted kind of a first look at the animatic year, and it does talk about this, of Aquaman, which looked pretty badass. And it makes me wonder how precisely they're going to be able to get these flash forwards in there, or if they're even necessary, right? Because putting a flash forward in runs the risk, like it legitimately runs the risk of causing chaos and problems in the DCEU. It does. Because when this sort of thing happens, it can be confusing. Like I said, the nightmare sequence was very confusing inside Batman v Superman. And if they find a way to handle it better, then that's going to be good. And I think that would be a good storytelling process as well. Again, my fear here is the fact that what you've got DC desperately trying to catch up to Marvel. And they're so desperate to get in on that they are starting to really kind of fuck with traditional storytelling methods, which might go over poorly if not handled well. So we'll have to wait to see. But I like origin stories as much as the next person. I do feel like they are necessary. So yeah, I would like to see a Cyborg origin story or a Flash origin story or an Aquaman origin story prior to Justice League. I know that that's not in the cards for what DC wants, and DC is just they're going to kind of scoot over those, and they're going to give us to them in terms of flashbacks. But it's the flash forwards that I don't like. It's the flash forwards that are going to be weird, because that we like teasers for what's going to come, but what we don't need, we don't need it to be like forced down our throats. That's why the teasers at the end of Marvel movies are well loved, because they're just teases of what's coming down the pipeline. So this is a little fearful. Hopefully they won't take it too crazy and it will be okay. But what are your guys' thoughts on this? Do you want standalone origin movies? Do you like flashbacks ideas? Do you think flash forwards can work out okay? These are things I want to know, so go ahead and write them down in the comments. My name is, of course, Matt Jarbo. This is 3 Buck Theater, and please subscribe if you're new and check back often for more movie news and commentary from me. I will talk to you guys later. Have yourself a fantastic day, and peace out.